Hello and welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I am Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and today we have with us Lee Wheeler-Berliner. He is the director of the Colorado Workforce Development Council. How are you doing today, Lee?
I'm doing fantastic, Alex. Thanks for having us today.
Yes,
How
definitely.
Are you?
I'm great, thank you. Yeah, excited for this 4th of July here. Yeah. So Lee is with the Colorado Workforce Development Council. We have you on once a month. We're doing our monthly check-in with you. And just for our audience out there, as a reminder, the CWDC is a dynamic partnership between workforce development, economic development, education, business, and government. It's a governor-appointed business-led coalition of state agencies and their regional and local partners, working to align the efforts of workforce and economic development, education, and training with the industry's needs to better serve students, job seekers, workers, and business throughout Colorado. The CWDC advises the governor and the Colorado legislature on policy matters related to all programs and activities across agencies and partners related to developing and strengthening Colorado's talent pipeline. The vision of the CWDC is that every Colorado business has access to skilled workforce and that every Coloradan has access to meaningful employment, resulting in statewide economic vitality. And we always have such a great show here with you, Lee. Would you like to introduce your guest?
Absolutely. So today, and a happy 4th of July to everybody out there, we are thrilled to be digging into the topic of career pathways and really looking at that supply side a little bit of our talent issues in the state. And so our guests today are Dr. Thomas Hartman. He is a consultant with the Colorado Workforce Development Council, and Melissa Martin, who is the director of Pathways with the Colorado Community College System. So good morning to both of you. Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, so Lee, we've talked a lot on this program about opportunities for Colorado related to talent development, and your office is recently restructured to better accomplish this work. Before we jump into today's topic, would you tell us a little bit about this restructuring?
Absolutely. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah.
So we've had some exciting times at the start of the summer here as we've really taken a look to say, what do we need to do as a team to ensure that we can continue to provide top-notch service for the state and really ensure we're tackling the skills gap and working on these issues. The Colorado Workforce Development Council has spent more than the past 8 years coordinating partners to better align the efforts of workforce development, economic development, and education with industry's need for skilled talent. Still, when you hear the intro, it's a little confusing as to who does what and how we're made up. And so part of our restructuring is to clarify the distinctions between the Workforce Development Council and the office as well. So the council itself is the powerful governor-appointed business-led coalition that is leading those integration efforts to build the Colorado talent pipeline. The CWDC office, or as we might just refer to as the office, provides the strategic, administrative, technical, and logistical support to the council, its subcommittees, and its task groups. The office also supports the Business Experiential Learning Commission, or the BEL Commission, of the governor, and we also support the State Rehabilitation Council and provide some partnership support to the Early Childhood Leadership Commission and the Education Leadership Council. So kind of two different roles that are really happening. Over the last 2 years, we have built a really strong team that works to convene, coordinate, and integrate the efforts of all those partners in the Talent Development Network. And with the office, we have restructured and aligned our team to ensure we can provide the best technical assistance to the field as possible. As a part of that, I've stepped into the role of director. Stephanie Veck is our managing director, and we've established a consulting practice area. As I mentioned, Thomas is a consultant with us, and we have a practice area focused specifically on talent development. We have a practice area focused specifically on industry-led networks as well. So a lot of exciting shifts, and we're looking forward to the way that plays out to drive our state forward.
Yes. Well, first of all, congratulations on your step up into director role.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yes, of course. So we have Dr. Thomas Hartman and Melissa Martin here with us. You want to give a little bit of background on them? I know we got their titles, but let's hear a little bit about their background.
Yeah. So Thomas is with the Workforce Development Council with the office, and he's central to moving forward sector partnerships and career pathways as key strategies for the implementation of state and federal legislation. He's been in Colorado for more than 20 years, but originally from, Thomas, what would you share?
North Dakota.
Okay, so lots of good...
I can't believe you'd admit that. I'm just kidding.
I try to hide my accent.
There you go.
So he's a great addition to our team, has a long history working within education and now working on the talent issues through our office. And Melissa is with the Colorado Community College System. I don't have her paper.
Oh.
Okay, we'll back that up on the tape.
Yeah.
And also Melissa Martin, again, the Director of Pathways with Career and Technical Education at the Colorado Community College System. And in that role, she collaborates to help develop career pathways for top jobs in growing Colorado industries, working closely with the CTE team and statewide agencies to support students and educators in identifying those doors to meaningful career pathways. Melissa, welcome. Anything else you want to share?
I think that's good to start. Thanks.
Okay, great.
Lovely. Yeah, so let's see here. Let's talk about this career pathway systems building a little bit.
Absolutely. So I think to open up really this segment and the topic of the show today, I want people to think about your career as an individual. If you think about where you are when you were in 5th grade or when you were in senior year of high school or freshman year of college, did you sit down and say to yourself, someday I want to be exactly what you're doing today? And then did you take a straight line through whatever education you needed to get into that industry and move? Probably not. And yet that's still kind of this myth that permeates society, that if you go through high school and then you go on to college, you can come out and go to work and you're going to have one good job and you're going to progress and grow. We know that that's not the reality in terms of having this straight line, linear direction. It works for some people. There's definitely folks in industries where it makes sense, but for the vast majority of Coloradans, that's not the story that they know. And so when we have a reality where careers take winding trails and have twists and turns and people shift, a lot of times you need that trail guide to help you understand where you're trying to go. And you need that navigator to give you that guidance on what are my opportunities. I know what I can do. Or maybe I don't know what I can do. Maybe I need help understanding what my competencies are. But then once I do understand that, what might be a good fit for me and what are the opportunities in in-demand industries that will set me up for success? Our workforce is changing very rapidly in the state of Colorado. We know what the growing industries are. We know those jobs. We know the competencies that are necessary to still be relevant as we enter this age of automation. And part of career pathway systems building is looking at how we look at those topics and really deploy them out to the field so that people understand where they're going. So with that kind of broad intro, I want to turn it over to Thomas and Melissa, who are the experts in this. And Thomas, could you start off just sharing a little bit about why this work is important to Colorado from your perspective?
Sure. Thanks, Lee. And Melissa will jump in at any moment.
Sure.
Couple of things we all know with the low unemployment in the state. And so the job market is a little bit of a seller's market, if you will, and yet there's still a lot of people that are underemployed. And so I think the last rate we heard, Melissa, I think you said?
I think it was May, 2.8%
2.8%
for Colorado.
in May, so we're really low.
Yeah, below the national average too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
A couple of decimal points for sure. And so that's one of the issues. We have a lot of very educated people moving into the state. We have a bit of a education gap with our homegrown students. We'd like to have more students graduate, and we'd like to have more students graduating with the skills and abilities that they need to move into either advanced education or actual employment or apprenticeships. The racial makeup and the ethnic makeup of the state is changing. We're very much becoming a strong Hispanic population state, and we look at a lot of our careers and the people that are in those fields now, many of them look like me, older white guys. So what we really want to do is put educators or mentors in the fields that we're looking at so that people of color or women can see I could do this role as well. We very much saw that when we looked at cybersecurity this year, and there's very much a shortage of women and minorities in those fields, and we all know that that's problem is just going to be exacerbated as the years go by here.
Melissa, in your intro, it talked about career pathways specifically. It's in the job title. So what do you see as why this work is important to Colorado?
Yeah, I think I want to zoom back out to your intro and really looking at the mission of CWDC and that connection point of connecting industry with the skilled talent to really make Colorado as vibrant from an economic perspective and vibrant from an individual and family perspective. And really, I see the career pathways piece as a fantastic link in helping to achieve that mission of, that everyone has. If we look at the strong economic climate in the state right now, fantastic, but we all know that's going to go in waves. So how are we making sure that we help individuals future-proof their careers so they can be ready for whatever comes next, whether that's a downturn in the economy or automation or what have you, as well as making sure that we're growing the talent in a changing demographics for our state, growing the talent that we need to meet industry demands.
Right. And that future-proofing career concept is not just for a 25-year-old or 30-year-old. We're seeing interesting dynamics with the aging workforce as well, right, Thomas?
Yes, that's exactly right. Part of being employed as an older person, obviously, it takes a lot of retooling. So we're working a lot with military folks coming out of the military, folks changing careers, and a lot of the occupations we look at, we are addressing an audience of not just high school students, but older students or older adults that are changing careers. So we're trying to make all of the information that we put out accessible across the generations.
Yeah, that's great. I myself was not a traditional student, so knowing that this is out there is really helpful.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different things that could be happening to attack this skills gap and to shore up the economic vitality of our state. But this specific work, what enables us to do this work, Thomas?
So we have some great legislation that's been enacted in the last few years, and the legislature continues to be responsive to the needs of the employment of the labor force. And one of the things that we talk about is House Bill 1165, which was back in the advanced manufacturing days. And Melissa, you've talked quite a bit about that, and that work led into what we're doing now. Do you want to give a short description of that?
Yeah, I think the conversation really started with that alignment question of how do we, in the context of the advanced manufacturing industry, how do you get better alignment between the skills and competencies that industry is needing and what the education and training providers are helping to produce on, as you mentioned before, the supply side. So the legislature in 2013 passed the initial career pathways bill to look at the specific industry of advanced manufacturing, and that legislation was kind of foundationally housed within the community college system to lay that groundwork for the process of how do we do this? How do we help bridge the gaps, help fix the leaks in the talent pipeline, specifically with a nod to advanced manufacturing? And then I think that really led into that foundational work, led into the passage of 1274 in 2015 to then say, okay, we have 14 key industries in Colorado. We laid a great foundation with advanced manufacturing. Now where do we go? How do we build on that?
In the early years of the House Bill 1274, which was the enactment of creating career pathways in industries that are important to Colorado, we started off with information technology. And so that was our first one. The next year, we did healthcare and construction. Again, two fields that are extremely important to Colorado right now. And through that process and through all of our partnerships, we very much learned, what are the key occupations? What are the top jobs? And then what are critical occupations? What's really important? What keeps employers up at night? What do employers say they're having the hardest time fill? Which occupations are people coming and not qualified to the level that the industry wants? So we do a lot of work with just doing research. And then we go back to the employers and we say, this is what we see, this is what we heard. That looks good. And then we get into our process of developing the career pathway tools.
So you mentioned employers several times. Tell us exactly how employers, businesses, and industry really get involved and engaged in this work. What does that look like?
So we've started off, we do a thing called industry forums. And what we do is we target key industries in the state, and we look at specifically who are the big employers, the small employers, who's hiring. And part of that process is, along with Melissa and several other partners, we do these forums in which we ask employers, what are the critical occupations? What's keeping you up at night? How can we inform the public? How can we inform students, people returning to the workforce? How do we let them know that these are important jobs? And part of that process, Melissa, do you want to describe your experience with that?
Sure. I think one of the things that I really like about this work is that it's Colorado specific. So when we're going out to the forums and we're engaging industry locally. And we're bringing to the table the labor market data and the baseline competencies that have been established, and going out and sitting in a room with industry around the center of the table and public partners, including the workforce system, industry associations, and education, listening to that conversation and saying, this is what we see in the job posting data. Here's what the labor market data is telling us and identifying as the top jobs for your specific region in Colorado. Does that make sense? And then also, here's the core competencies that have been established for these top jobs. Does that make sense? And so it's that validation process, but it's in a face-to-face conversation, which I think really brings it home and makes it a process that people can really wrap their head around, and it gets at a much deeper level than I can read the data, I can read a report.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's a lot of people who can relate to the idea that you were hired into a job, you had a job description, you've been doing that a few years, you might read that job description now and think, this isn't what I do at all. So it sounds like this process is really a matter of looking at the data, but then communicating with employers to understand what is actually happening, what do you actually see within your workforce that you need. Is that right?
That's right. We get a lot more of that qualitative information, and we learn things that data just can't tell you. Mm-hmm. So we learn why a certain program is producing a certain type of student. Mm-hmm. And we're able to take that information and say, it's a very open and honest conversation, and it's industry's at the center of the conversation. So it's industry-led. And industry, we try to create an environment so that they can tell us, without worrying about offending anybody, what's working and what's not working. And we take all that information and we go back to the schools, we go back to the colleges, and we say, here's what industry's telling us. And we've had schools change their programs, update their curriculum. So it's a very responsive process. And when we do that, industry and education both are seen as partners and not, supply and demand necessarily only.
Are you focusing solely on post-secondary education, or do you work with the high schools and elementary schools as well?
I think the idea of a career pathway is not that one and done like Leah was talking about, but let's take a look at where do students get exposed to careers. A lot of that can depend. It can be in elementary school, middle school, high school, all the way up through post-secondary or an apprenticeship or what have you. So I think really it's all levels. The reality of that is there are complex systems in there.
Yes.
So making sure everybody's at the table and how they work together, I think, is what keeps us excited about what we do.
Right. And a lot of our work is around systems and partnerships. And as we've talked about in this show on this series, we have our next generation sector partnerships throughout the state. I'm thrilled to share that we have 25 active sector partnerships at this point in time. We've recently had an IT partnership launch in the Boulder-Broomfield area and an IT partnership launch in Canyon City in Fremont County. So it's great to see how that's happening. And those sector partnerships are a starting point for this work around career pathways. Whenever we're looking at an industry where we have established sector partnerships, those are the groups we go to. We start by communicating with those conveners and those business champions to focus in and engage in this work. And if we're tackling an industry where there's not an established sector partnership, that's one of the places where the conversation starts, is to say, can industry align in this model, which has been proven and we know that it works. Recently, Colorado got to send several folks, 6 folks, to Chicago to a national conference of next generation sector partnership conveners. And so it was an invite-only small group where we were really working with the people on the cutting edge of this nationally, sharing the insights from Colorado, and really gaining other ideas and things that we can put into practice from states like Oregon, who've also been doing this for quite a long time. And so we're excited to start deploying those models and those resources throughout the state moving forward as well.
Yeah. You guys are one of the few, not few, there's a lot of industries in Colorado that take on that collaborative effort, and you guys definitely are at the top of your game when it comes to collaboration across Colorado, particularly for this.
Well, thank you for that, Alex.
Yeah.
It's great to hear. We know that it's critical. That
Yes.
if you want to do something really fast, you can go alone. If you want to do something, go far and go do it well, then you need to go together. And that's something we definitely believe as we move forward. I want to dig in, Thomas and Melissa, both to this idea of just career pathway. I think we've used that term, we've tossed it around, but some of our listeners may be wondering, well, what exactly do you mean? So just give us the overview of when we say, what is a career pathway? What exactly is that?
So at the highest level, we're really talking about creating career pathway systems. And the system invokes the partnerships, the industries, the industry associations, the sector partnerships. But a system engages education, engages the training, it engages industry, and then folks like us. And it's a continuous conversation really talking about how an individual can move seamlessly through the different training programs, through their different career cycle.
I like that.
Okay. And where do we go after that systems level?
So once we get into the systems level, we actually start producing products. And the main product that we have that's kind of our deliverable is Careers in Colorado. Careers in Colorado is a website. It is basically an interactive website where job seekers can look at what are the key industries, what are the industries that have high growth, have a lot of openings, and will pay a livable wage. That's sort of our criteria for what is a top job. And that's how we start. We fill in the jobs. How do I get into that occupation? So that it's not just a point A to point B. It really is that pathway all along. So I can start here. I can get this education. I can move to here. I can get this certification. I can move here. A pathway implies lots of on-ramps and off-ramps for either education or advancement.
And I think I'd like to build on that and say, starting at the biggest picture level, the systems development. How do the systems interact with each other, and how do we help to move that talent pipeline along? And then looking at the individual level with, okay, a student or a job seeker could go to that Careers in Colorado site and help navigate for themselves, or with the work of a career coach or advisor or counselor, really help work through, how do I see myself individually moving along a career pathway? I would add that layer in the middle of the program level. So where does that happen? How do we go from the systems level to the individual level? And I think that's where part of the partnership of having a representative from the education side of things in this conversation structurally helps to say, okay, a lot of those pathway programs, whether it's a curriculum or it's part of an apprenticeship program, how do we help the individual or job seeker move through that process for their advancement or certification or what have you, to build the competencies to get them to the next step?
And from your perspective, Melissa, you're looking at career and technical education, which has a focus in the post-secondary realm, connected primarily to community colleges and technical colleges, but then also at the high school level as well. So can you
and
give
middle
us
school.
And middle school even. Okay. Can you give us a couple examples of what those programs look like kind of at that educator level?
Sure. So CTE, Career and Technical Education, many people might have heard of it as vocational education, depending on how old you are. So the basis of CTE is really career-connected learning. How do we prepare students to be workforce ready? And that starts in the middle school and goes all the way. In Colorado, we have a somewhat unique structure through post-secondary. So I think bringing that to an example, Thomas, you referenced, okay, how's career pathways work really kind of move the needle? And I think one of the ways that that's happened is in a medical assisting program. As part of the conversations that involve the healthcare, and even before that, really, what are the needs of the industry? And okay, if they identify that there's a gap in having medical assistants, how does that reflect back? Where are the programs that are helping to produce the talent that industry is ready? And I think they realized, okay, let's have those conversations back and forth between programs. In this case, was particularly at a community college, to have those, what is really needed and what's the pace of change, and how does the curriculum need to change and flex to help prepare the workforce?
Thank you so much for that. We're going to take a quick break here on Connect and Collaborate. Please be sure to stay with us. Check out Careers in Colorado while you're on this break, and be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page. We'll be right back. Hello, and welcome back to Connect and Collaborate. Once again, I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer. I have with me in studio here Lee Wheeler-Berliner. He is the director of the Colorado Workforce Development Council. Again, congratulations on your promotion there. That's very exciting stuff.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it. It's great to be here.
Yes, of course. So, just as a reminder, we need to let people know the CWDC is a Colorado Workforce Development Council, first of all, and it's a dynamic partnership between workforce development, economic development, education, business, and government. And we gave the big long speech at the beginning, so yeah, let's jump right back in. We're having a fantastic conversation here with Dr. Thomas Hartman and Melissa Martin.
Okay, thanks, Alex. So as we were talking before the break, there are career pathway systems that are bringing together business and industry and education and other public partners to the table. And that's really the ecosystem that's necessary for the work around career pathway systems and career pathways to thrive. And then Melissa was sharing a little bit about the program level and how education can actually build in curriculum that is responsive to the needs of industry, contains work-based learning opportunities, often has partnerships with nonprofit organizations, public workforce centers that can connect in some other supports for the students who are going through that, so that there truly are multiple on-ramps into these fields. I think when we look at the talent gaps that Colorado has, we know we need to get people just about any place we can find them. We really need to be looking at untapped populations that have a lot to offer the labor force, but may not be participating in the labor force right now. And I think when we look at the current historically low unemployment rate, that's even more important. And so the career pathways that we're focused on really can open the doors for people from all walks of life to understand where they need to go and what they want to do. So as we jump back into this conversation, we've talked about career pathway systems building. And Thomas, I'd love to hear more about what that actually looks like. How does that happen? What takes place? Who gets involved?
Sure. So we do a lot of research up front, and the first 2 years we created pathways. They were legislated. So we knew we were going to do IT. We knew we were going to do healthcare. We knew we were going to do construction. But after that, it was open. And so the staff to the council or the office basically did some research, Melissa Martin as well, in the Community College System office, all of our partners, a bunch of research. What should be the next 2 pathways we go after? We present that information, and this year Melissa and Lee presented it to the council, to the whole Colorado Workforce Development Council. And because that's made up of industry and educators and people that hold a lot of sway in the state, came up with the decision to which are the next 2 pathways. So that's the initial piece. From that, we go into building that system out, and we talk to employers out there once we know what the field is, what the industry that we're tackling is. We have our forums, we do our research, and then we talk to programmers, educators, folks that are designing the curriculums. And then we put all that together in a map. So when we talk about maps, they go so far as in 2013 when we were building manufacturing maps. They were big 11 by 17 posters, and they had a lot of information on there. How could you start this program, and what does it pay, and who's hiring, and all of that good information. And what we've been doing now is putting it out rather than on a map, a physical paper map. We've created the map through Careers in Colorado. So it's more of an interactive map. You can kind of go along the path, click on this job, and it'll open up with all the information. Click on that next job, all the information. And most importantly, it shows what are the competencies, what are the education, what's the training, what are the certificates you need to move from one career to the next. So it's not just, hey, when I grow up, I'm going to be this.
Right.
It's, I'm going to be this, but I'm going to start here, I'm going to move into the next job and the next job, all the way up from, I'm going to start off as a clerk and go through to be the CEO. And so we try to map the whole thing out for people so that it's not just that next job. It really is, what is your career?
I would imagine that probably keeping in mind that a lot of students aren't going in debt then right up front when they start on their educational careers into the workforce, right?
We're very much into a work-based learning kind of model, and we're very much trying to work with employers to do competency-based hiring, so that when you look at a job description, it's not just 5 years experience and a degree in accounting. It's it's some experience, and show us what you've done. Who have you worked for? What were some of your tasks that you did, and what competencies did you bring to bear to do those tasks? And so apprenticeships, internships, things like that, where you can demonstrate your knowledge, skills, and abilities. That's really what we talk about when we talk about competency.
Yeah.
How do you apply the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you have?
When I think about the career pathway map, a couple things that stand out to me is, oftentimes you talk to somebody and you're like, you got to this point in your career, but the part is missing of how did you get there? And then if you're at a certain point in your career, where do you go from there? So I think there's a lot of opportunity in those transitions. And one of the things I like about this process and the mapping process specifically is it's not only the middle level, mid-career types of jobs. It starts out with the entry level. Where do you start? And then where do you progress? And then we're in those transitions. What do you need to do to help bridge them? And then if you eventually want to go somewhere in your pie in the sky ideal job, how do you start to map that process? And I think, too, one of the things that's interesting is it's not just a linear map, as Lee kind of opened the radio show with, is it's that, okay, assuming that you're going to change careers, and I know there's a lot of different statistics about change careers 9 times, 12 times, what have you, and the idea of future-proofing. But if you're starting out and you're working in one industry, how do you take those competencies that Thomas referenced, and where's the transferability? So you're not necessarily on a one-and-done pathway in a certain industry. How do you then jump pathways and build your own? So we map out, in the context of the site, specific pathways for industries and kind of job families within those industries, but also where are the jumping off, where are the on and off ramps into other industries as well, to help really people visualize, where they can go.
Right. And we've used the word competencies a lot in this conversation. So I just want to give a little more context around that. The office is really supporting our state's shift to a competency-based talent ecosystem where there is competency-based education taking place and also competency-based hiring taking place within the workforce. And this is being incorporated by employers. And really what we see is that when you look at the data nationally, there's almost an over-reliance on the idea of a degree, specifically a 4-year degree, being used as a proxy to say, well, someone's qualified for this job. They have a 4-year degree. It may be in philosophy, but somehow that means they're qualified for this job in accounting or for this job in manufacturing because they've got that 4-year degree. And as that's happened, it's contributed to the skills gap because then we don't have people ready to step into these jobs. Employers are not getting the people in the door that they need, the people that could definitely do the job, because they may not have that actual piece of paper. And so when we take the competency-based approach, it's really breaking down what are the knowledge aspects, which may be academic skills, with what are the technical aspects and foundational aspects of abilities that are necessary to thrive in a specific work environment, and really lay that out in a way that makes sense, that people can connect with, they understand what they bring to the table. And then we also help support employers who want to redo their job descriptions. We partner with other agencies, including Skillful and local workforce centers, who can provide education to an employer on how you do a competency-based hiring process and how you write that job description and that posting and that screening process to really say, what can somebody do? And one of the really neat things about the Careers in Colorado website is that jobs are labeled as entry level, mid-level, or advanced level. That entry level is less than a 4-year degree. What are the combinations of skills, certificates, and credentials that may be needed, but it's still less than a 4-year degree to get somebody on that path? And what's still being built out is some of the connections and the lateral movement pieces. We are entering an age where we're going to see shifts in industries. We're going to see some jobs that disappear to automation, and yet the skills that somebody has in that environment could be very useful and very valuable in a different industry. And so through this website, they can help to understand, an individual can see, these are the competencies that I have, even though I've been doing that in the construction industry. How does that play out in a completely different industry moving forward? So it's really exciting to see where that will go.
That is very exciting, and I love the fact that you're working with employers to change that verbiage, right? Because that's one of the things that's really tough. you do a keyword search and all you're looking for is that 4-year degree. It's really frustrating for those of us in the workforce, looking for employment. Do you have real results yet from seeing a shift in utilizing the competency-based learning?
We know that public partners have gotten on board with this idea of the shift to competency-based approaches. We have educational entities that are integrating this into their practices, and we have a large number of employers that are integrating this now. And so when we see that it works, we know there's good results. We're still in some of the early phases of what this looks like.
Okay.
And I would say, too, that it's interfacing with systems change, which is going to take some time.
Yeah.
Because looking at kind of traditional academic models, we have to do some rethinking and looking at how do you look at competencies? How do you teach competencies? How do you assess competencies to make sure that, that it works for students, that they're getting what they need to get? So I think there's a lot of conversation that's really in the beginning phases, I would say, at least in this iteration of the process, to say, okay, how do we do this? This makes sense. How do we do this?
And through the office of the CWDC, we have consultants who are ready to help employers, and we can connect you with the right people to provide some technical assistance if anybody's interested in going down this path. I do want to bring us back to what is most happening recently with careers in Colorado. Thomas, you talked about information technology, construction, and healthcare. What else has been done, and where are we right now with the site and with industries?
Thank you. It's been a great year. It's been a lot of fun. Melissa and I have gone out and done the road show, and we've talked about how we engage employers, and we've talked about the forums. And part of that forum process also leads into that competency building. So when we say industry-led, we really try to hold true to that. So we go to industry and we say, at a national level, here's what people say are the competencies for this occupation. And we make a giant grid of all the competencies. Then we almost go out and play bingo with the employers. And they say, what are your top competencies? We get a bingo, and that's what we put out on the website. So this year, we did that process. We went out to business and we went to cybersecurity firms. The business firms, we're really looking at occupations that people go into managing, organizing, running a business. And Melissa can talk at great length about that also from the CTE perspective and beyond. The cyber perspective was very interesting because there's a lot of push behind that right now with the state. We have the National Cybersecurity Center who we partnered with. We've partnered with LinkedIn, lots of neat, larger worldwide organizations, statewide organizations, and then down to the local industry. And we found some very interesting things within cyber. So we can go into some detail about that too, but it was very exciting. It's a new field, so there wasn't a lot of information out there already. Mm-hmm. So most of the information that we collected were through our interactions with the industry.
Nice.
So it was focused in on cybersecurity as one industry this past year, and then business operations as well. Would you like to add on to that?
Yeah, I think business operations was particularly interesting because when you think about it, we had a lot of initial conversations about what does that even mean? You have business that could be considered an industry, and you have business roles that cut across industries, which gives us a great opportunity to say, okay, here's a lot of transferability and skills. Project management is the one that first comes to mind. So when we talked about the business operations, how did we figure out how to scope and define that to give us a starting point? And I think that cyber and business operations in particular this year gave us interesting opportunity to look at the model and see how do we structure this? Neither one of those industries per se had established sector partnerships explicitly. Cyber, of course, relation to IT, business operations, you could go into anywhere and had strong individual pathway industry association presence. So I think that gave us an opportunity to test out the model in industries that weren't as clear-cut as manufacturing or construction or healthcare before. And so I think that gave us a chance to also say, how are we representing that information online? How do people want to consume it? How do people talk about it? What's the vocabulary? Mm-hmm. And I think that would be a pitch for us moving forward to ask industry, hey, come come give us your opinion. Help inform the work, because we want to make sure that what we produce makes sense for how industry is talking about it, and we frame it in that context.
So if I'm an employer who wanted to get involved in a forum, do I have to drive to Denver to do that from wherever I am, or what does that look like geographically?
So it works out for both of us. Melissa and I get to travel the state, and employers, we meet them where they're at. So we go across the state and we kind of do the road show, and we'll go to where we have pockets of population or industries within that. One of my favorite stories is going out to Durango, and when we were working on the IT project, and this relates to cyber as well, but they didn't have enough of homegrown students. And when you live in a part of a state where people often leave and don't come back, or they're mid-career and they want to live in an environment, is their job mobile, or can they do it online? There's some great IT industries out there. And what they were finding is they would send their students down to the Front Range where they had a program that they could participate in. And then they got into that whole Front Range chasing the dollar kind of thing. And so you had a lot of companies poaching off of each other. And that's another good plug for an association or for them to work together, sort of the all boats rise sort of thing. So anyway, through those conversations with industry, the local college reinstituted their program so they could train and grow their own locally. So they figured out a way to do that. One of my favorite parts of the industry forums then is we are doing regional information. So we find out not only what does a cyber professional look like in Colorado Springs, but what does a cyber professional look like in Denver, Boulder? Okay. And they're very different, surprisingly. To me, it was very surprising how different it was. But now it feels like it's second nature. Of course, in Colorado Springs, there's a strong military presence. Right. And security clearances are part of the criteria to become a cyber professional. Whereas when you get up into Denver, Boulder, and beyond, it's almost flip-flop. The majority are not military. The majority don't need a security clearance. So it's really nice to have those nuances depending on where you are in the state. And we do that, we address that on the website.
So tell us a little bit more about careersincolorado.org. How does it look now, and how does someone get regional information through that site? So we've gone through a nice user interface upgrade in this past year, and so the site looks a little bit different. It feels a little bit different, but it's we start off when a user first enters the website. You're going to get a picture of a carousel, and each carousel has one of the industries that we've created pathways for. So as you're looking through that, you'll see one like cybersecurity. And when you click on that, it'll give you a little bit of industry information. Say you don't know a lot about cybersecurity, they'll give you some general information about what is it like? What kind of work is it? Who likes to do this kind of work? What are some cool little facts about this industry? Almost, we call them snacks. Okay. What gets you into it?
I like that.
And once you get into it, then you get into all the occupational information, of course. But we start off we have a Colorado map, and each of our map is broken into regions. So we have 14 regions. And so you can pick a region, and it'll talk about what are the top jobs within that region, within that industry, and also what are the nearest programs where you can get training for that.
That is so fascinating. That's what a great tool. I really want to underline this tool for you guys. And again, that's Careers in Colorado.
And it's .org.
.org. Thank you. Yeah. I appreciate that.
Melissa, what would you say about who the site is designed for and how different audiences can engage with the site?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think that the design of the site is intended to reach a wide audience. So whether that is a middle schooler starting some exposure in school to, career opportunities and vocabulary, whether that's through a job seeker who's currently in the workforce, who's utilizing a workforce center and working with their team to help either retool or upskill or change industries. So that's the long-winded way of saying kind of everybody, which is awesome and challenging at the same time point. So,
but a theme of job seeker. I kind of heard in that what you said.
Yep. Someone who's seeking more information on where to go,
Okay.
What's out there and how to get there.
And then if there's an advisor or a parent or a career coach, what's here for them, for that person?
Sure. We're just starting. That's in kind of this next version too, of helping to build out the resources to support the career coaches, advisors, counselors, workforce center team in helping to facilitate those meaningful career conversations with the student or a job seeker. And we have a page that's on the website. If you're up in the top right corner, you can see that section to give an overview. And we're really starting to build out those resources and tools to help facilitate those conversations.
Okay. Great.
Ultimately, the feature that you were talking about, they call it a hamburger menu.
You guys have such great names for
Well, this came from our developers, yeah. So I resonated with that. So if you click on the hamburger menu, it drops down a short list and resources for advisors, counselors, career coaches, things like that. And the other neat thing about it is if a user goes through, and let's say I've got high school kids, and they have things that they're asked to do for their career counseling, and they go in with their counselor, well, they can say I was on this website, but you can actually print out a full map and all of the details of a career that you were exploring, and you can take that into your counselor. At a workforce center, you could take that whole printout and bring it to your workforce person that's helping you and say, I've done my research, I'm interested in this field, what can we do next? So that's a little feature that we like. From there, we try to make it as easy as possible for somebody to say, I've got this information and now I know what the next step is.
Yeah, I love this tool, and I think that's fantastic. A little snippet there. Last week, we learned on Connect and Collaborate that MSU Denver and CSU Global both have cybersecurity programs. MSU Denver's will be available this fall, 2018. Okay. I know we moved on from that a little bit, but I want to let our audience know, right? As you said, it's a growing industry right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so the new version of Careers in Colorado just launched last week at the tail end of June. And so that's now live with the cybersecurity industry and the business operations industry. And now we're able to look ahead and say what comes next. The Colorado Workforce Development Council took a vote in May to say what do we want to look at for 18 and 19. So share with us where we're going to go from here.
Drum roll, right? In the coming year, we're going to look at education.
Okay.
And that is a big topic. So we're starting to have those scoping conversations of, okay, 0 through what? So looking at early childhood through elementary, high school, post-secondary options, and really saying, okay, education as an industry is a little bit different than how a lot of the conversations that we've talked about education typically go. So that we realize that education is critical to producing a vibrant Colorado. So that's where we're going to go.
So there's been conversation about the teacher shortage at the high school level in the past year. In May, here on this show, we talked about early childhood education, some of the struggles of that industry and what they're looking at. So we'll be digging in across that full spectrum to help map out what the career pathway opportunities are so that we can ensure that that industry has the right talent flowing in, because education does support every other industry that is necessary for a thriving economy. I know we've seen in some parts of the state where they've really identified a lack of childcare as a barrier to economic growth. And so we're excited to see how this career pathway work won't solve that issue, but help support that through getting a quality workforce in.
Right.
Yeah, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for joining us on this wonderful 4th of July. We appreciate you coming in.
Absolutely.
And again, check out careersincolorado.org. That is an exciting site. You can check out your whole career pathway from there. And check out CWDC. You can...
Correct. At coworkforcecouncil.org, you've got a lot of resources. And if you're in an industry that we haven't named, but you think this is something you want to do, we actually have a step-by-step guide for building career pathway systems. And you can download that PDF guide free from our website. You can read through it and understand, how could I pull this together with my industry, even if it's not one of the ones that is being targeted. Reach out to us at any time for help as well.
I love that. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you
Thank
on.
you.
Check out those websites. Check out this podcast and more at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. And be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page while you're here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.